Oh, hi, everybody, and welcome to our Thriving LDS Singles Podcast. Today, we have Kay, me, and Kim here, and we're interviewing Eileen Hardy. And Eileen is a person who is living her very best life. She is certainly thriving. And if you want to follow some of what she does, she has a blog called Living Our Bucket List. So welcome, Eileen, and we'd love to hear more about what you're up to. So tell us a bit more about you.
Oh, whoa. I'm a 67-year-old divorced woman who's LDS and active in the church. And I always had things I wanted to do when I was married and raising my daughter and living the good life. But when I got divorced, it's just me now. It's just me. And I don't have to work around anybody. And so I realized I can do the things that I always thought about doing, but I never really could have because I was married and had to be home and doing things with another person and planning around other people. And so I just started thinking about what the things were that I had always wanted to do. But I can't say I really took action, but I remarried into a bad situation. And after maybe 8 months of living with this new LDS man, I went through a horrible divorce. Very depressed. And I was just really out of my mind depressed. For one thing, I made a very poor choice getting into that marriage, which reflects badly on my brain and logic capabilities. But so at the end of that, I was just lost. And I decided something I had done before was crew on some long bike rides where people told me, you're really fit. You could probably ride your bike across the country. And I think I don't even really have a good bike. And so I decided that year I was going to do it. And so I made a goal to ride my bike across the country. And in doing that, I realized that is a form of travel that I can afford. I'm not a wealthy person. I loved meeting people across the country. I loved seeing the scenery in all the small towns. We weren't on big highways or anything like that. Just I went with an organized tour and I just totally loved it. And when I got done with that, I just decided I'm going to ride every coast of the US on my bike. Okay. And so I did. And then in doing that, I met other people that are kind of adventurers and then maybe followed them on Facebook and saw the kind of things they were doing. I thought, wow, I could do that. And so I have an adventuring friend who's also an LDS single person who I met up with a few years ago. And I said, how do you afford to do all these things you do? He says, it's really not very expensive. And he gave me the playbook of how to do my next 4 or 5 adventures. And so he introduced me to things.
That's really cool.
Yeah, I met him at the Nauvoo Singles Conference, and he's from Florida. And he had, since the Singles Conference, had hiked to Mount Everest Base Camp. I think he trekked to Machu Picchu on the Inca Trail. He had done Kilimanjaro. He had a bucket list item to go to all 7 continents. He'd done that. And he's like younger than me. And I just thought, and he showed me, you can actually do some of this stuff and you don't have to be wealthy. You can go on a safari and not be a wealthy person. And so I was like, I got a bucket list now. And I had a list of things to do and I just started working it. A little bit of it.
This fits so well because our podcast last week was about being solo and traveling. And there's some real benefits about being solo and traveling, and one of them, of course, is you get to do what you want to do, right, and go where you want to go.
It is liberating, is what we decided.
Yeah. Spend time the way you want to spend it. Spend as much time or as little time with different things as you want. Yeah, it's nice. Yeah. There's some big advantages to traveling people too.
Yeah, we did acknowledge that. It is good to be with family and friends and enjoy the difference between those kinds of trips too. But there is something really liberating about being on your own and getting to wake up every morning and say, what do I want to do today?
Right. Yeah, no, I can't say that I've really had the luxury of doing that because everything I do is very well planned. Now I'm about to do something that's not that well planned, but everything, like I need a place to stay tomorrow night if I'm riding a bike. I can't just say, I'm just going to get on my bike and stop where I want to. You can't do that. You have to have something planned. or you'll be at a fire station or at the police station or something, which I don't want to do. Yeah, no, everything I've done has been very structured, but I'm in control. Could have been structured differently if I had somebody else involved.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's beautiful. I think the downside is not having somebody there to share really cool things. You
Yeah.
can take a picture, you can talk about it, but it's really fun having somebody who's in it with you and that your minds are on the same mind path and you can share it with them. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I think that is true. I used to travel a lot for work, and there were so many times where I would see something new and think, oh, I wish so-and-so was here to see this with me.
Mhm.
Or I wish there's definitely that drawback.
Yep. It's just a drawback.
Yeah. So tell me
That's right. There's swings and roundabouts.
That's
Yeah.
right.
Right. Tell us, so this playbook, it sounds like would be something everyone would love to have. Is it something you plan to share at some point, or do you put stuff on your blog? What are the tips and tricks for the playbook?
Yeah, I think people that are cyclists that want to do epic bike rides could see my blog. And I mentioned the nonprofit in the US I follow, but in Europe, when I finally decide to go to Europe, I think I'm going to ride Eurovelo routes. It's an established route system that people Europeans have set up some organization, maybe the EU did it, and started establishing long bike routes all around Europe, like 16 or more of them. And so I'm going to follow, that's going to be my playbook there, is just following the routes, and they don't lay out the lodging and things like that, like they do here, but that's like a country that's been around for many more centuries than the US. So a lot of things are more established. But if I do write about the treks that I've been on, I would put down who I went with, because in every case, I highly recommend whoever I went with. And it's just connections I got from the fellow from the Nauvoo conference. And then when I checked them out, sometimes they were so inexpensive. I just thought, are you kidding? I can go to Africa and climb to Mount Kilimanjaro and go on a safari for this amount of money. Wow, I would have never thought it. I always wanted to go on a safari, but I think I looked one time and they were $7,000, and it's now that's not going to happen. But when it was $1,800, that was a much more doable. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I would put them on my blog, but I'm accessible. Somebody can look at my blog and figure out how to get a hold of me.
Very cool. And we'll put a link to your blog
Yeah.
in the notes too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know when you did tell us a little bit about your last adventure that you were on.
Yeah.
You had two, because I noticed, but tell us about going from Florida to Canada, and then tell us about your last adventure. How about that?
Oh, those are my last two. Hold on, let me look at my notes here. Okay. I rode my last leg of riding my bike around the country was to ride from the actual bike route goes from St. Augustine, Florida, to Bar Harbor, Maine. And I have ridden two of the northern tier and the southern tier, the northern and southern coast of the US with a friend. One of them is somebody I met in the group that I rode across the southern part. I did the northern part with. It's a guy who's married and lives in California, but his wife doesn't want him doing those bike rides alone. And so we get along really good usually. And so he was also wanting to do the Atlantic coast because he, like me, I did the Pacific coast solo, so did he. And then he realized, no, I don't want to do that again. And so when I planned the Atlantic coast, he wanted to get in on it, but our dates didn't line up. So we did them like he's a week behind me. And he actually met me. And then he also wanted to do the entire coast from the beginning of Highway 1 to the Canada, like the whole way, not just between two towns. So that I did part of it with him. We rode from Miami to Key West. Then he waited for a friend that he did the rest of it with. Then I took a rental car back to Miami because I don't want to ride it twice. It was hard. There was a lot of headwind and ocean breezes and things. And then I went on my own from Miami to St. Augustine. And then I rode with a fundraising group for multiple sclerosis up to Bar Harbor. And then that's where they stopped. And then I rode the last few days to get up to Maine by myself. And it was a great trip. It's a great trip. Just seeing the country. This is a wonderful country. You got to see it. And as I ride along, I just look at these places. I think, oh, I would love to bring my grandkids back there, but how can you do that? They'd have to have so much free time. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? It's Charleston. We rode our bikes through, rode our bikes through Savannah, Georgia, and stopped and look at all this historic houses and statues and things. It's, oh my gosh, my grandkids would love to see that. Just all along the way, it's fun having somebody there who enjoys seeing that stuff. Some people just, especially men, they just want to get from here to there. They don't care about seeing anything. But like my friend Ed, when he rides with me, he enjoys seeing things. If he's got a man along, he wants to go man speed. So
Interesting.
yeah, so he went man speed. No, I
So
ended up having a woman along. Slowed him down. But that was a great trip. So I think I did that in the spring because that's when the weather's good there. And then just a little over a month ago, I did a trek to Mount Everest Base Camp in Nepal. And even just going to Nepal that's third world country on the border of China. You can get to Mount Everest from China or from Nepal. Those are the two countries. And I'm going from Nepal, obviously. And so I was with an organized group. A guy that I went to high school came, and then there was a couple from Australia, coincidentally, Kay. And they were about in their early 30s, and the gal was a doctor, which is great because I need her. I know I have an altitude problem because I tried to hike Kilimanjaro a couple years back, and I made it up they don't call it the base camp, but I made it up to what is the base camp, where you stop and rest, and then you make the final push to the summit. And on the final push, I hit the wall and I couldn't do it. And I'm pretty tough. And I was puking my guts out, dizzy, couldn't walk a straight line. And there were still 3,000 more feet to be climbed. And those were symptoms of altitude sickness. So I had it bad. And so I couldn't make it up Kilimanjaro. It was over 19,000 feet. So Mount Everest Base Camp is 17,600 feet, not quite as much. So I acclimated a lot for it. I went and hiked a peak in Arizona, Mount Humphreys, that goes up to 12,600. My friend Jim and we basically hiked it every day for a week up to the saddle, which is 11,800. And I had altitude headaches on the very first day, but then I was over it. And then it got easier. So we did that the week before we went to Nepal, then got on this trek, and we were fine. And I never really got a headache till we got above 16,000. And I'm taking medication, Diamox, which you take for that. And so I actually was surprised how well I did. I made it all the way up to base camp. I was struggling for air, but everybody was. Had a mild headache, no big deal. But then when we came back down to spend the night before doing the descent the next day, we got to this, they call them tea houses, where we're staying, and I puked my guts out. I just got there, sat down, and I was sick. And so the doctor from Australia had told me, if you get nauseous, come see me. I have some anti-nausea medication. So she gave me a pill, and she said, you will not have any more nausea, which is great. Because another guy who I had met who hiked to the same place that day had already thrown up 5 times.
Wow.
Yeah. And like when you've already, at some point, you don't have anything to throw up. You're just.
Yeah. And then there's other dangers of being dehydrated and
Yeah,
everything.
he threw up 5 times. So I was okay that night. The next morning when we got ready to leave and I got outside, I realized I can't see. My depth perception was gone, and I was dizzy. I couldn't stand up very well. I started walking. I felt fine. And I started walking, and I just almost immediately just fell over, and I'll smack my face on the ground. And wow, I'm messed up. One of our guides, we had a guide, 2 guides, 2 porters for 4 people. It's a lot of crew. So the main guy just took me by my arm and just held me next to him, and we just walked side by side. He just held me upright for 2.7 miles. And that I realized, like, I'm not doing very well. Like, I'd have to stop and catch my breath really often. And I'm in great shape, so that's not right. And the vision thing never got any better. Everything's just, and so anyhow, so my friend Jim and the doctor's boyfriend are walking up ahead because they're doing great and I'm suffering. And they were talking, she told him she thought I had like acute altitude sickness and I need to get off the mountain. At one of the stops, when I stopped to catch my breath, he said, you're not going to like hearing this, but we think you need to catch the helicopter off the mountain when we get down to the this town, the first town we're going to. And I was like, yeah.
By then you were ready, huh?
Normal way would be like, I'm not doing that. I'm going to hike down this mountain. But we weren't descending fast enough for me to get over it. And so they called in a helicopter at the next town, and Jim and I, a guide and a porter, we all just flew off the mountain. They took me straight to a hospital. But by the time we flew down from there, we descended 12,000 feet in minutes. All my symptoms went away like that. Yeah.
Wow.
But I still had to go to the hospital. I still had, the food hadn't been agreeing with me very well. I had an upset stomach. And then to get my insurance to pay for that, I had to go to the hospital anyhow. Yeah. It didn't end the way I wanted it to, and I didn't enjoy the helicopter ride because I was basically asleep in a coma. And that's what it felt like. But I was really glad to get off the mountain.
Yeah.
The two people that had to walk down it, they didn't enjoy it.
Yeah, it was a much more delightful way to get down, at least.
Well, I mean, if I could, Jim could see it, my friend. He took some pictures, but I was just, even when we stopped, when I say I can't breathe, I got to stop again. We would stop, I'd lean against a rock and I would just fall asleep.
Wow.
I'd be like, and then they'd have to, I think we got to get going again. Then I'd move and we wouldn't go very far and be like, I got to stop and get my breath again. And that's why it's like, we would have been there like, who knows, till midnight, just getting, we would have never made it to our next destination for the night with me along. It's going to be really slow. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
so it's great that there is options like helicopters then, isn't it? It's,
right.
Aren't we lucky that we have those options?
Yes, we're really lucky. I can tell you on Kilimanjaro, that wasn't an option. You either had to walk down or go down on a gurney. A gurney that's on these big bike tire wheels, just boom, boom, down a mountain over rocks and things. And that would have been a nightmare. I get injured on Everest Base Camp.
Yeah. I was just saying the lesson there then is, really do your altitude, getting used to the altitude is really important for those sorts of trips. Yeah.
But what I realized is that I got higher on Everest Base Camp than I did on Kilimanjaro. I never made it to 17.6 on Kilimanjaro, maybe made it to 16.8. And it's because I had acclimatized. But the other thing is that some people's bodies don't do altitude. My body shouldn't be going above 17 or 16 something, and it never will again. I'm not gonna put money into something. You know what I'm saying? Like my friend Jim, he didn't even get a headache. And he did Kilimanjaro and he made it to over 19 and didn't have a headache there either. He doesn't have an altitude problem, but a lot of people do. And you don't know till you find out.
Till you find out. So choose some other mountains and learn.
Right.
How to do it.
But you just don't know till you find out. And I think that's just the point where my body's not going to do it. But I'm not going to push it. That's okay.
Yeah.
I'm glad I pushed myself and I had the experience and I made it to base camp.
Yeah, you gave it your all.
I gave him my all, and that's all. I came there to go to Mount Everest Base Camp, so I made it, but I didn't make it down very gracefully, but that's okay. I made it down alive.
Yeah.
I could have kept pushing myself and had a cerebral edema or some kind of brain problem that could have killed me. That's the potential of just acting like you can do it on your own and not giving into what Western medicine tells you to do.
Yeah, recognize your limits.
Yeah, so I'm glad I got a little doctor along. I'm really glad she was there. That's just, I'm blessed. Had somebody good there by my side.
Yeah.
So one of the questions, I've done a fair bit of traveling around Australia on my own, and the question I get asked all the time is about safety. Are you worried about safety traveling on your own? So we might as well address that question.
Not very much. It's always a thought in my mind, and I used to carry a little mace thing in my bike bag when I was on bike rides, but I never used it. It was always just in the way. But I can say that when I was riding along the Pacific coast in California, I camped in a couple of campgrounds that they were state or county campgrounds, so they're publicly owned and have rangers and people there. But they put the bicyclist in the camping site that's really far away from the people with their cars and trailers and things. And 2 times I camped by guys that were using recreational drugs. And that scared me because they could get drugged up and think about me being some older, vulnerable female, and maybe they can try and rape me or something. And so that scared me, camping away from people. That actually, 2 times I was by guys that were using drugs, and they were in pairs. Maybe they would empower each other to take advantage. That was my fear. Okay.
Yeah.
And then another time I was just in a campsite all by myself. It felt 100 miles away from all the other people. I was very isolated and I was very uncomfortable. I travel when I'm traveling alone like that. I have an inReach tracker that my sister, who cares about me and wants to know where I am, she'll look and see if that thing's moving. And one day I hadn't turned it on in the morning. She called me, Eileen, are you okay? Because I'm looking at your tracker and it's not moving. Oh, dang, I forgot to turn it on. Okay, it's working now. But I'm saying I'll have a tracker in case something happens, but that doesn't really save you from anything, does it?
Yeah. But
the thing is, people ask that question, well, like, well, I could never do that. It's like, if I wait to have something to do, a person to do things with, Kay, I won't be able to do anything. I mostly don't have somebody that wants to do these things.
Yeah,
and
you're just gonna not do it is the other option.
And I'm not going to miss out on living my life because I don't have somebody to do things with. And this may be my whole future. I may never have a partner to travel with. I don't always have a girlfriend to travel with. I can find guys easier than girls, but that's got its own thing. But I would rather travel with somebody than without. But even that can be problematic too, right?
Yeah. And don't live our lives being afraid.
I can't live my life being afraid. Yeah. I have no regrets over the things I've done. And scarier to me on the bike rides is cars running over me than my fear of somebody doing something to me.
Yeah, so true.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot not watching.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways to die, but so should I not do anything because I might die? No, then I'll never do anything. So I can't not do things on account of that either.
Yeah.
And then, yes, the experience I've had too is traveling with people has its downsides too, doesn't it? They don't always want to do what you want to do. They don't want to go where you want to go. They've got different ideas of what camping looks like.
Oh yeah, no, that camping thing. It'd have to be like pre-auditioned. Because there are a lot of people that just won't camp though. Okay, the idea of I haven't actually been on a backpacking thing. I do have the Appalachian Trail on my bucket list, but I don't know if I'm going to have enough good years to make it there. I'm saying I have other things I want to do that are lengthy, go on missions, right? Those are a year. I don't know if I don't know if I'll have the capability by the time I get to the point where I have the time to do that.
Yeah.
You have to see. But that's serious backpacking where you're carrying all your food and gear and everything, and you're going for 3 or 4 days sometimes without provisions. And not a lot of people our age would want to do that.
I've done a couple of those. The ones I've done have an option where you pay a lot more, but there's actually wilderness cabins that you can go stay in.
Yeah, huts.
And they're actually provisioned. And so all you're carrying is the stuff you need for the day. And then you turn up at these cabins. So they're wilderness cabins. They've stocked them at the beginning of the season. And there's usually some guides with you, and the guides run ahead. Fascinating how they run ahead when I'm struggling to walk. But and they prepare, you turn up and there's this beautiful cabin in the middle of nowhere, and they cook you this 3-course meal, and you've got this bunk bed, and all you have to do is
that's the deluxe way to do it. The deluxe.
It's the deluxe way to do it. And I must admit, I really like the deluxe way of doing it.
Is that in Australia? Or is that
yes?
Yeah.
There's a place in Tasmania that I've done called the Overland Trail. So it's right. There's a mountain in the middle of Tasmania, and you basically walk around the mountain. And if the weather's good, you get to climb up it, but the weather's often not good enough to climb up it.
Yeah, that's cool. I would do that if I could afford it.
Yeah. So it's called the Overland Trail. It is a really impressive thing. Yeah, and you get to see this.
Writing that down, a new item on the bucket list.
I'm writing it down.
And it's all pristine, like there's no civilization anywhere.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's the next thing I have coming up is the Camino de Santiago.
Hey, Eileen, before you talk about that, I want to say a couple of things on your last little adventure. I want to ask you a couple of questions.
Okay.
I want to hear about Santiago. So a couple of things. You said it's easier to find men. So Eileen is one of my Strava buddies on Strava, the app, and you work hard. You are out working. We can't not talk about how much you train to be ready to do the things that you do.
Yeah, I'm not going to fail. Yeah, the first bike ride, like when I say I didn't have a bike, I did have everybody has like a bike. I had some bike and everything, but if you're going to ride your bike across the country and put heavy bags on it, you need the bike that is made for that job. Otherwise the bike's going to fail. So I bought a bike for that. That's just one thing, but I started getting ready for that a year in advance. My first time I did a training ride, I could ride my bike maybe 6 miles and I was like, oh, my legs hurt. So I worked up to riding more and more distance over the period of a year. It wasn't like a 1 month thing, or some people would think they could do that. And there were guys that came on our trip that thought they could do that and it didn't work. They had to quit because they blew out their knee or something. But it's like on a bike ride thing, I train hard. And if it's a hiking thing, then I switch gears and I'm out of mountains and things like that because I don't want to fail. There's a lot of time and money invested in getting to some place like Nepal or Tanzania or France. You know what I mean? You got a lot of time and money invested. And what if you get there and you can't succeed? So I'm not going to fail. I say I'm not going to fail.
You're going to do everything you can.
Do everything I can to succeed.
Yeah.
And like on Kilimanjaro, I couldn't succeed, but my body just can't do it. There's no way I could ever prepare myself for that. Oh, wait, I take it back. If I knew somebody that lived in the peaks of Colorado who would let me come stay with them for a month, I could succeed at it.
You could gradually build your
I just stay there and get used to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know that person.
So, and then back to why it's easier for you to find men. It's because it's a lot harder to find women, especially in the 40 plus or 50 plus category that are that active and working that hard. And so a person like me could not keep up with you, which is why it's probably easier for you to find buddies.
Yeah, but you could.
I know, I'm trying. I have some hope. I have some hope this year. I might be able to get a little better, but I'm just nowhere, of course, near what.
No, but you could, because some of the guys like Ed, my favorite writing friend, who I did the Northern Tier, Southern Tier with, and then did that little section down by Key West. He's a heavy guy. He's not, and he doesn't train as much as me, but he must have some innate fitness capability that sticks with him. And I think a lot of men have a better muscular thing. Maybe their hormones make them have better muscles or something. I don't have that going for me. I have to work hard at it. But he just muscles through. He made himself strong and he muscles through. And he does lose weight when we're doing things.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm very impressed that, because people that ride bicycles, they're all about having everything be really light, and they'll pay another $7,000 to save 8 ounces on the weight of a bike or something. It's just lose a pound. Come on.
Yeah, that's true.
Or you could cut back on your diet for 2 or 3 weeks and lose 3 pounds, and it'd be a lot.
Yeah, this is where and obviously it's harder for some people than others, but I know when I was training and running a lot of miles to run marathons,
right,
I never looked like a runner ever. People would look at me and say, "You run marathons?" Because that's just not my body size and weight. But I could do it because I have endurance. I could stick it out. It'd take me twice as long as everybody else, or 5 times as long as everybody else. But I'm not going to give up. I will stay with it, but slow.
Yeah.
The tortoise. I'm the tortoise in the race.
I think really it's a lot of it's determination, and the other thing is just starting on hiking or biking or whatever, starting with whatever, some low mileage, and then sticking with it and working your way up. And it doesn't matter about anything else. Like, you get to where you worked your way up to where you can go the distance you need to go in a day, and you're there. Doesn't have any, you achieve the fitness level you need without making some big change in your body, your life, or whatever. I think anybody could do it. And like I've had people say to me, "You're an athlete." I'm only an athlete because I made myself be one, because I decided I like doing this bike riding and hiking. I wasn't a biker or a hiker before. I was a housewife. with a college student daughter, you know what I'm saying? I was just like anybody else, but I ended up in this situation, divorced, no life, depressed out of my mind, and I had to do something. And I'm glad I did.
Yeah.
So when did you take up the fitness? You're saying, so your daughter was,
I haven't
grown
taken
up.
it up.
Oh,
What
you haven't
is-
taken
I just have goals. Do you know what I'm saying? It's what I do is driven. I don't go to a gym and work out or anything. I ride my bike, hike. I try and maybe do some things for pull on the handlebars. But when I started training for the first bike ride.
And
know,
you
and even
you were
then I was-
already, you were almost an empty nester, or were you an empty nester?
I was an empty nester. Yeah.
Hmm.
But I've always been fit
Yeah.
because I was in the Army for 31 years. So I always had to maintain a certain level of running, push-ups, sit-ups, just to show the young people that you got to compete with the boss. Kind of like that. No, I mean, I just tell them, you think I'm an officer and I'm going to be lazy and I get the special physical training test. No, I'm taking it with you. And I'm going to get a perfect score. They'll be like, no way, ma'am. And that would make them work harder. And I'm
Yeah.
older than you. And so it would make them work harder. So I always worked out for the running, push-up, sit-up, run thing in the Army. So that is the general level of fitness, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you've maintained your fitness from early life, and then you've added
Yeah.
to it as you've trained for these special events.
Yeah.
Good. All right. What's the next adventure?
The next, I got two things. I always have like my next couple of things planned.
Join us for part 2 and hear about Eileen's plans for her next adventure.
It was so fun having you on and getting to hear more about your adventures. So
Thank you, Eileen.
Bye-bye.
bye.
Bye.